Hello and welcome to episode 176 of the Foundry Roundtable, a podcast exclusively covering the Foundry for Star Trek Online. I'm your tame Foundry author, Drogyn1701, who is, unfortunately, will not be here the whole time tonight, but I'm here to get us started. With me is the insane future version of Markhawkman.
Hello, how are you doing today?
And Greendragoon, who is from an anti-time future and is moving backwards.
Why did you just say that?
You'll find out soon. Or you did find out soon. I don't know.
I can't keep it straight.
When is happening?
When is now? Now is then. And, of course, DuncanIdaho, who I forgot to think of a thing for, so... He's just DuncanIdaho.
I'm free!
You are an android from, billions of years in the future who has gone insane.
Oh.
Or something.
I
don't know.
I actually have a persona tonight. Can't be my own, man.
I've just invented all of this stuff for you guys, of course. Now you have to RP it.
Yeah.
I'm like a dungeon master, I guess.
Tonight on Roundtab, we roll for critical chance on whether or not the lighting works.
And I, of course, am the person here who has done like no tabletop whatsoever, and no RPGing, none of that, no Dungeons and Dragons.
Now I feel we got to change that.
I've done it once. And that was pretty fun. Although that character hasn't shown up in Star Trek Online yet because he was Manbeard the Wizard.
Actually, GM'd a session once. Not very well, but I did it.
You encounter Trogdor the Burninator. I just know that from a scene in Buffy, so... Anyway, not really too much going on in the way of news, other than the next featured episode is coming out on Tuesday, and it will feature Geordi and the Nexus. There was some interesting speculation. In the blog it says you're going to be investigating the disappearance of the USS Forrestal and encounter another long-lost ship. That was quite interesting. What could it be?
Enterprise E?
Yeah, could be.
I'm thinking it's either the Enterprise E or the Hera, which was Geordi's mom's ship that disappeared.
Yeah, I saw you speculating on Twitter about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I think because those two ships have personal connections to Geordi, who we know is going to be in the episode. So
yeah, and
the fact that they made a big deal in TNG about specifically and extremely explicitly stating that no one had even the foggiest clue what had happened to the Hera.
Mm-hmm.
They know anything.
I've seen some speculation of thinking that maybe it's Discovery, but I don't think so.
Oh yeah,
no, not before it's.
I think it's too soon for that, because then you're presenting the fate of a starship that we don't know what its fate is going to be in the show. Cryptic wouldn't. I don't think they'd. That would be too courageous.
There is the possibility that they could have inside information about Discovery.
Yeah,
we know they do.
They've been going through meetings, and they've kind of almost been presenting this in real time on 10 Forward Weekly, going from we've had a talk recently with CBS. To actually get that as a turnaround to ship designers, I think, and a full-on plot that inserts into a mission that we're just getting now, I think that's way, way, way too quickly. Because these missions take a long time to make, months and months and months, and we know that Cryptic has just recently really started talking to CBS to the point where they're confident that they're going to be getting Discovery content. So I would not look for anything Discovery.
I'm thinking November, December, something like that.
I would even think like just beginning of next year, like maybe a few things, anniversary event type thing, just with development cycles. But we'll see.
We'll see. They they could go ahead and make the ship and make it another Discovery class ship or whatever class Discovery happens to be.
No, I mean, I would be shocked if he saw any Discovery content before the actual show airs.
Yeah,
that would be, yeah.
I would actually expect the devs to get some stuff to work with before the show airs, but I don't think they would actually intentionally release anything before the show airs.
It would be quite timely, though. A good cross-promotion. But we'll see. We got 2 weeks left to Discovery, 2 weeks and 1 day. Very exciting time. It was also the 51st anniversary of Star Trek this week.
Yay!
Yay! I'm not one to celebrate, anniversaries that don't have a zero with them much. But it's still an exciting time to be a Star Trek fan because we got Star Trek Online, which is great, and we got a new series coming out for the first time in 12 years.
Yeah. And yeah, a lot of really cool stuff coming up. Mm-hmm. Although I'm hoping from Cryptic, I'm hoping for a new escort from the C-Store. That's what I'm hoping for. Again,
C-Store escort. Well, they haven't made a T6 version of the the patrol escorts.
Yes,
yet.
That is exactly what I want.
Maybe.
And it's just like I'm just holding on to 3000 Zen right now. Like it's gonna be coming sometime. It's gotta show up at some point. So yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to. There's a lot of cool stuff, but it's just like that has me sort of on the edge of my seat because I kind of know where I sit with Discovery, and I kind of know where I sit with just ongoing cryptic content, scans, the new Type shuttle, Type 7 shuttle too. That giveaway should be coming up in the near future.
I'm not necessarily clear if that will be also coming on Tuesday or if that will be later in the month.
Yeah, they just specified September, so they've got some flexibility.
Yeah. There will be a new season in October, from what I remember.
Yeah, season 14 sometime in October.
Which will include a new episode, another one with Geordi, continuing the Lucari storyline. And giving us a new fleet holding and a new spec.
Yeah. Yay. I'm excited for that one because I've got some engineers that could use a little bit of buffing.
I personally have several characters who I never bothered to spend spec points on, so I can just have one of my characters just kind of like jump on it and suddenly become awesome or something. I don't know.
I'm curious about this one because it's kind of unusually engineering specific. I mean, I guess the temporal was kind of science specific, but
it was very command is sort of tactical.
Yeah,
I mean, the temporal spec had certain aspects of it that had no purpose beyond buffing exotic damage.
Exotic damage, gravity well, and yeah, it was very much. It's one of those. If you're running science, and especially in an exotic build, you got to use it because it's very, very good. Now, with Miracle Worker, it's engineering heavy, but what I found kind of is the case with engineering. You don't necessarily want to just do engineering because then it's like, okay, well, I don't explode, but I wasn't exploding anyway in Stowe. So it doesn't you can certainly go too far in making yourself defensive such that you can't really do anything. So I think engineering is going to really work out for people who are running lighter builds who then need to not explode. And that's why I'm thinking escort.
Oh, I mean,
because escort.
I'm not going to pretend that the engineering isn't probably one of the weakest when it comes to offense, but I don't want to say that it's completely non-offensive.
It's one when you're buffing power levels, that's definitely the case. Just because that does have very direct benefits. But I've run an engineer pretty intensively. And compared that to, it kind of just tried to find ways to making it more effective. And the most effective engineering builds I've run, one is an exotic damage engineering build, and the other is a Motha Raptor engineering build that basically just goes full-on offense and uses the engineering ability to supplement. So it's tough to just do straight defensive engineering, which it seems Miracle Worker is maybe a little bit more suited to. From what few things we've heard about so far.
You mentioned sounds an awful lot like one I did with a Mo guy where I would run the universal seats as engineering seats so that I could get extra power on abilities. Like, I actually built this ship so that it would cycle aux to bat and emergency power skills almost non-stop, along with a full assortment of tactical skills, because it's actually a tactical commander ship. So, fire at will everywhere. Torpedo spreads also everywhere.
So there's a good discussion here in our chat room about whether or not Tuesday's patch will bring any Foundry downtime. And the short answer, of course, is we never know. But I don't expect any, really, with this.
No.
It's just a featured episode. So
yeah, we don't get featured downtime with featured episodes. But the phrase
it's not gonna be a huge patch.
Bortescu did use the phrase "nude code branch" to describe seasons 14. So there's probably going to be
I'm
downtime.
thinking October
really
for sure.
Odds.
Because the code branch merge is the big thing. So.
Yeah.
Something get messed up?
I don't know.
No?
It's like everybody went silent there for a second.
Well, yeah. I mean, we just sort of made the point about new code branch. So
okay. So anyway, what we're gonna do tonight is Dragoon's gonna we're gonna pin him to the wall and get him to work on the Romulan bridge, while the guys talk about many different things.
Yeah.
With some occasional screen sharing and whatnot.
Okay, yeah. So I was just setting some stuff up for my bit of screen sharing, so I'm all set with that.
Well, Dragoon can get himself into the Foundry. And while that's loading up, he can tell us, because I know he's been working on some stuff, so he can tell us about that.
I have. This I would have loaded up my screenshots ahead of time. But I've been kind of doing two things. First off, I have... So it's funny, because earlier this week I ran a poll. I was like, which should I work on? 26th Century pilot episode or Midas Part 3? And so it started out, and at the beginning it looked like Midas had pulled ahead. So I was like, all right. And then by the time, a little bit later, as it was getting close to the end of the day, they had actually tied, and they were both at like half and half. And then by the end of the day, 26th Century had pulled ahead. So I was like, all right, I'll work on that one tonight. Well, I hadn't bothered to set the time on the poll, and so it ran for a full 24 hours. And by the time it had ended, Midas Part 3 had pulled ahead again. So I ended up working on both.
Just a quick note, I did forget the new Galaxians here. I'm going to guess that we're going to get that on Tuesday as well.
Yes.
Is it
Foundry we could...
Not in the Foundry, probably, but...
Odds are not in our favor on that one.
In game.
Not that we wouldn't love it.
Yeah, unless...
but I mean, new maps are always good.
Yeah, unless it's just replacing one of the stock Galaxy interior maps, but... Yeah,
Seems unlikely. They've never done that before.
Which we don't have that either, so...
Because that wasn't how the Voyager revamp went down.
All right, so I've got a couple of screenshots to show. First off is this is the my test sun, so to speak. So one of the requirements for the 26th Century pilot episode is we kind of need to be in somewhat close proximity to Sol, and so we can have our dealings with the Vorgons. But at the same time, because I don't want to have it throwing a ton map transitions at the very beginning, it needs to be triggerable, so I can make it disappear and stuff. So this was my attempt to kind of get a start. It's a little rough, but I mean, otherwise it's very glowy, and looks kind of like a sun. And I threw in a planetoid in there to be Mercury.
I like that. It looks good. It's a gas giant with a bunch of nebulas on it?
I don't even think it's a gas giant. I think it's one of the Class Ys.
Ah.
Well, I figure if I put it up far enough away, you won't really notice how big it is.
It's definitely glowy enough.
Yeah.
that
Yeah, you get those nebulas close together and it gets that
Yeah.
whiteout.
Although, that's just a whole pile of nebulas right on top of each other. I know who's going to be struggling with this map.
Well, it's not probably that many. I don't think it's probably enough to.
It's for most
kill
people's
anybody's graphics
performance.
card?
No, for most people's performance, it's fine. For mine, there's my computer for some reason has a very specific bug where if there's overlapping two-dimensional objects with some aspect of transparency, the frame rate goes way down. So I can have like 2 nebulas, but then if I got 3 like in a row, then I notice an FPS drop. So it's very specific to my machine. My computer has the power to handle it, but there's a bug that was introduced with Season 11 that just kills my frame rate in these situations.
You're still running on an old AMD FX processor, right?
Yeah, so it's probably something specific to the motherboard or the CPU.
Yeah, I remember I used to have a lot more issues when I had one of those. Because I used to get the whole Ryza slowdown problem.
Mm-hmm.
another feeling.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's down to, for me, it's the overlapping grass textures, or the 2D grass assets that kills it for me.
Yeah, I used to have trouble with that on one particular map. Not anymore since I upgraded.
Yeah.
Yep, I just haven't hit the point of upgrading yet.
It happens. It happens at a different time for all of us, but there comes a time in a young man's life when.
Yeah, this computer. It's like 8 or 9 years old, and it still runs really, really well in every other situation.
So the other thing I worked on, figured I might as well get in some work on part 3, and so I'm continuing my work on the Kowloon map. And it's getting to the point where you start out in this upper level, and at the beginning you can kind of overlook everything and see city, and then you kind of work down to this middle level, which you're still kind of on top, but it's kind of where the government of this colony is. And then there's a chase that ensues, and you end up in the lower levels. And this is actually kind of some of the lower levels that I'm working on. I haven't really gone through and added lots of little detail assets. It's mostly just kind of getting the buildings all laid out. Kind of going for more of that increasing claustrophobia as you get deeper and deeper. I can't take it too much because obviously your boss still need to navigate and stuff like that. But still kind of that you're descending down, so you're going down several ramps to get down this far, and the buildings around you get higher and higher.
It'll be a cool concept. I actually saw something the other day that reminded me of what you were building here, and it's from a scene in Ghost in the Shell.
The new movie or the
big
anime?
cityscapes. I'm pretty sure it was a shot that was replicated from the anime for the new movie, which is the one I watched. So it's both, actually.
The anime version had a rather, shall we say, gray and rather bleak-looking cityscape, but to keep it from being boring, they emphasized multi-level construction on all of the buildings.
Can't build out,
So-
build up.
Well, exactly, because, again, it's set in Japan, so they kind of have a history of that.
Not a lot of room to build out, so have to build up.
Yeah, that's
Got
what I'm working on.
quiet again.
I liked the live-action one, Ranger OU, a bit as well. I have not seen the anime. I didn't think it was a great movie, but a watchable one.
The anime will confuse you if you watch the series, then the original movie. Because the original movie does things differently than the series, and if you watch the series first, you will have more, shall we say, firm notions of what things are supposed to look like, and then they won't.
We were actually just talking on Twitter a few minutes ago about people watching things sort of out of order and coming to franchises from a different entry point. You know, the sort of new fans of Trek that are coming in for the JJ films and then discovering the rest of it as they go.
That's how I got into Star Trek in the first place. The first series I was introduced to was TNG, then TOS. So, unless you kind of started from the beginning, everyone's kind of hit this entry point with the franchise. It's just now we can sort of describe it to the things that we consider brand new.
I'm trying to remember if what I saw first was TNG or Viewmaster reels of TOS or TAS. It was one of the two. It was actually about the same time. It's quite so hard for me to remember because I remember I saw one of them and then got confused when I remembered something happening in an episode. I remember something that happened in the Viewmaster episode, and then I watched the TNG episodes and it's not there, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it was early enough for me that the transition between TOS and TNG just kind of blurred together. But I mean, I was like little, like 3 or 4.
I remember watching, or my parents who were kind of casual fans, they showed me and my brother Star Trek 4 because that's sort of kid friendly, apart from maybe a couple scenes with the language. the colorful
really
metaphors.
kind of dumb or toned down.
The colorful metaphors. And that was my entry point, and then TNG was on the air at the time, so at a certain point I started watching that, I think around season 7.
Yeah. The very first Star Trek episode I ever saw was the just coming in the room at the end for Best of Both Worlds Part 2. So my first Star Trek memory is Picard at the very end of that episode. Just his reaction. And that stuck with me.
So we're looking at our bridge here, and I think at this point what we need is, the bridge station's on the lower level there. To fill that out, and then kind of some walls extending on the sides, and then the glass front.
Yeah,
I think that will be pretty well done.
Not quite sure how to do the front.
I have faith you'll figure it out. or we'll help you figure it out.
I mean, one thing you could do to cheat, because the glass is going to be really tricky to get right, is that you could cheat and just call it a force field and use invisible walls. They're going to be... It's going to be, it's going to require a little bit less precision, and it might ultimately look a little bit nicer.
I do think you'll need some walls coming forwards from the side a little bit.
Yeah, just to cover it, like, on this, there's going to be a little bit of the...
So that you can't see most of those birds of prey out there, just their wings.
So I'm going to...
obscure that.
Yeah, so... Oh, yeah, this is going to be a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, it could just be that, especially because we want other people to be able to build this easily. Maybe just kind of keep going with those walls. And then have... Oh, yeah.
I know.
This one will be the less easy one for people to build if they want to build it. Obviously, people could completely make up their own Romulan bridge if they need one. The Klingon bridge that we built is quite easy to make.
Yeah. Can we get to the bottom level?
I can walk off
we
the
will
side.
need some sort of ramp or something.
Oh, God.
I am not going to try and connect the upper levels and lower levels.
We did sort of forget that.
Yeah.
Nope. I was going to put a door here at the end of the hallway and call it good.
Oh, God. Because that was our crowning achievement, getting that right. Oh, no.
What was our crowning achievement? What?
Oh, yeah, it was getting that, like, the circular ring of wall pieces right where you're like to the right of where you were walking a few seconds ago, at the very least. But yeah, that central, just what almost like just it looks like a central pillar of,
Oh, and I managed to kill Skype. Sorry, guys. Hang on. I will get back here in a sec.
What about
Okay, sorry.
Like-
Hey guys, we got disconnected there. My Skype decided to crash.
Oh, okay.
That sucks.
I tried to screen share with you guys so you didn't have to wait for the delay, and boom, it just went.
So what's on the stream?
For a while, it was just me there for a minute.
Yeah. So it's just it's the camera. Like the stream's not been interrupted, but our dialogue has been.
We were talking about was not on there.
Dang it!
Oh yeah, we only lost about maybe 10 seconds while I restarted Skype.
10 seconds.
Okay.
Oh, well. That's
So
right.
can people hear us now?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm thinking on this one. Okay. So what I'm thinking on this one is that we don't try to glass in the bridge according to the upper boundary. We glass it in according to the lower boundary.
What about the top?
Maybe make it a little bit easier. So the edge of the disc that you are on right now, that is where the glass is, and I think you can.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too.
Large black asset here in just a second. Yeah, pillar black L01. You kind of use that to define the edges for where those glass pieces are going to be.
You use the smaller glass pieces.
Be really tough to glass. Maybe just
unfortunately, I have to go.
Okay.
I'm sure you guys will be able to effectively continue on in my absence.
Alrighty.
Good luck.
Dragoon is trying to take over. One by one. So what I'm thinking, it's still going to be really tough to get that with glass because we just don't have a good glass piece of the right dimensions.
What if
because
we
they're all
just?
square.
What if we just?
I'm thinking Invis wallet.
I was going to say, what if we just like put up some pillars that kind of extend out? Because we got some arched pillars, right?
Well, we got the curved pillars. So what do you mean arch out?
So that one that we've got that kind of got for pillars.
Okay, because we got if we want a curving pillar, it's just search for curved.
Yeah, pillar curved L1. But
it's not that high though.
Yeah, no, I mean we'd have to combine several no matter what we do.
Yeah. So the only pillar that's probably going to reach the ceiling is going to be the black L01. If we try to basically set the boundary on the lower disk. On the higher disk, we got some options.
Let's throw down a black 01 and see how high it actually gets. I figure this episode's just gonna be a lot of us waiting for the
I mean, while you're trying that out, I mean, just testing out a pillar, I could kind of go into a little bit of my thing.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it would basically be substituting in, because I didn't work in the Foundry at all this week. I just did a little short story dabbling. Nothing too big. But what I could go ahead and do is show off a little bit for Epoch Part 2. Because we're talking before the show, just to cue in people listening, about how to sort of work on making more interesting space maps. So I've basically got something I've already prepared that's to a quality that I would be happy to publish if it was just that one map. So what I can go ahead and do is kind of show off what's going on here. Oh yeah, that's not high enough.
Not by itself.
No, but yeah, it would just be 2, and then you would have to change the X and the Z just to get rid of by a very small margin, just to or no, just using a separate No. Yeah, you could use even something completely different, because that actually might be a neat look. If it's that, and then something else going further up, maybe. Ooh. This might be interesting, especially with lighting effects. What about? Let's see. It's the ESD. Wait. Oh, that's right. I'm looking at a space map. I was just trying to search in for the asset, and it's like, wait, is that not showing up? ESD hanging light 01, and have the light right at the top of the pillar, and then the rest of the suspending wire that kind of continues up from there. Well, the arches might work too, assuming the base kind of plays well with the other top. But what we can go ahead and do in a little bit then is to kind of show off like just different tricks for building out cool space maps.
Okay. Why not? I'll keep working on this. You get started on that, then you can share your.
Okay. So yeah, I'll just go ahead and start doing this screen share. Share screens. Start.
Don't crash. Please don't crash. All right.
Better
hide anything you don't want people to see.
I've already done that. So I had to redact one map name, but everything else is pretty tame, so long as I don't go back to the description page. Because I've made notes for myself. So this is going to be sort of the first map in Epoch Part 1, or Part 2. And there's not going to be any spoilers, basically. Hey, what we get up to right at the start. And I've already shared some pictures on this on Twitter. But I'll just give a quick overview and then go through how I built it and then start a new map up just to sort of show the map being built from step 1.
Okay.
So loading that up right now.
Trying to dial in the height of my curved pillar. I don't know. I think there might be potential here if I can find something to kind of bridge the gap between the end of the curved pillar and the ceiling.
Let's see. I'm thinking discs, because let's see. The building block pillars might, but I think they're going to be the same width. What about something spherical? One of the Borg throne pieces. Horde eggs are going to be a little
Need
small.
something horizontal.
Oh, okay. Let's see, horizontal. What about it? ESD mannequin stand?
No, I need something like long and straight.
So something like a railing, which we don't have.
Yeah, something kind of like a railing that we don't have.
I mean, we got the. We have the pipes, and there are variants of that aren't rusted.
Yeah.
So I've got space map now.
Okay, you're on.
All right, so this is the first space map that I've made for the 4.6 million year in the future time frame. So what I've kind of done here is sort of overlap, like just talking about the assets real quick. I've made sure that there's a lot of texture, a lot of stuff. So what I've got right here is a space station made up of several different components interlaced together, and then also interacting with different types of objects, specifically these molten rocks, to kind of give the appearance that this is sort of a processing facility. And a few ships here. Moving on, I got a destroyed planet, and then a planet right behind it, just to sort of give a little bit more of a view. So things are overlapping. It's visually busy, so there aren't a whole lot of dead spaces. And then I've got some basically some debris that's being arced towards another planet in the system. So it's kind of difficult to fill absolutely everything, but one quick thing you can do for a multi-planet system like this, or a planet and then some large moons, is to just kind of space them sort of around where the player is going to be, so you can have that moon fill in a part of the map that really doesn't have a whole lot going on in the backdrop. And it doesn't take a whole lot. So this is just one planet with 2 large moons. And that's certainly plausible. Well, 3, but that one's being smashed up. So, yeah, so that's one thing I do use quite frequently is just positioning planets in just such a way to fill in space. And then what I've done here is basically just combine a bunch of debris fields and then change the height to give them a little bit, a lot more texture. So, I'm getting shot. I'm a great wizard.
It looks really nice. I mean,
and it's got the working lighting because this is the Foundry. This won't look as good in a published mission, but yeah, this is what our maps could look like with custom lighting. Yeah.
Isn't the Vulcan backdrop?
Yeah, so the Vulcan backdrop, which actually will still look really nice. So the backdrop will still look really nice, and there's actually going to be still some like lens flare effects that'll come up too. So the backdrop on this one is this is one of the first, or actually the second map I made using custom layers when we thought that could get around our space lighting problems. So I'll get away from that. There we go. So the first layer is just sort of standard starfield. Then I added on a bunch of other things, including fluidic space, because I really wanted to make this look very alien, very different. And then also some gaseous nebulas. So we can go ahead now take a look just in the editor real quick. So starting off, backdrop. This is what I got going on. So with that crazy backdrop, I only needed 4 things. Starting off, yellow star cluster, fluidic space detail, Vulcan, and then hide and seek. Just adding texture, but without getting too crazy with that one. So you can still see a little bit of space, but there's a lot visually going on. And then this is what the map looks like in full, with a bunch of objectives set up and other assets. So we can go ahead and just create a new map just to kind of show how to sort of just create something completely on the fly, not really knowing where you're going to be starting. Because for me, it's a process of iteration. So I'll just go ahead and put a few things down, then we can jump right back to the Romulan bridge. So first off, I'm going to go ahead and select to customize, because right now there's really kind of no big difference between our preset backdrop layers and our current custom layers, because space lighting just doesn't work at all. So anyway, just starting off, I mean, we can have objects in the distance, but I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of that just to focus on the space layers.
So I would almost argue that going into the stock backdrops is a good way to kind of get some inspiration.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that, like, new authors definitely just, if you want to just use something that's off the fly, then go ahead and yeah, I mean, it's certainly a good place to start. But yeah, I specifically wanted to show off though what was going on with the backdrops. So let's just go ahead and get started. Just something different. I mean, say we just wanted to have a different looking, let's see, different looking map close to a nebula. I mean, just starting off something simple like that. Just getting some basic ideas. So let's go ahead and just start off with the blue nebula. And then let's add another sky layer. And fill that in just with one of the custom star backdrops. Now, there's actually kind of a few things that I've started working with here. Because if you just added the standard star field, so let's go ahead and just set this up. Adding in the standard star field, it'll look pretty stock. So there's not going to be a whole lot going on visually. You'll have a little bit of the cloud effect and then just the standard stars. So we'll just go ahead and show this off. Jump back to the Romulan bridge, and then I'll add in a few little tricks too.
I'm a little quiet because I'm also trying to simultaneously.
Yeah,
the Romulan bridge.
Yeah, I mean, with two of us working in the Foundry simultaneously. Let's see. So let's see what else we got for discussion. I mean, we've already kind of gone through a lot of speculation about what's coming up the Dominion War, or not the Dominion War, but where
Discovery?
Star Trek. Basically post STLV, where's STO going to be going between now and the next expansion?
You're talking about the Dominion, the hypothetical Dominion expansion.
The hypothetical Dominion expansion that's been
It's probably a
teased
Dominion
out.
expansion.
It's probably Dominion expansion. It's just, Cryptic doesn't talk about upcoming content, which you've heard if you've watched 10 minutes of any, up to 10 minutes of any given 10 Forward Weekly. So anyway, this is kind of what I'm talking about when you're making a space map. It sort of...
Don't just put stars.
Don't just put stars, or even just a single nebula, because it makes sense, but you can do a lot more, and in a couple of very specific ways. So I'll just go ahead and add these in, start loading up, and then continue discussion. So the one thing I really like is star clusters. So I just typed in cluster, so I'm going to go with a blue-white. This adds textures to the stars by creating a little bit. You've got larger stars in clusters. There's more visually going on. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is to play with the nebula a little bit, because we just got that one. Technically, it looks like a nebula, but it doesn't really work so well because it's just flat. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to play with color. So we got blue down there first. So let's go ahead and add another color in.
That's a whole subject in of itself, is kind of the color theory behind space maps.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with something that's a little bit complementary. So blue-green, so close on the spectrum. And there's certainly, you can get some leverage just by doing contrasting colors. So things that are just polar opposites, green, orange, and so forth. So loading this up again. So it's one of those things, it's really useful to think about when you're creating a custom backdrop. Think about it like art. You're just making a painting, and you want it to make it look good. You may have an idea functionally about how this map is going to work, but you do want to think about how it's going to affect the player, considering that they're also playing other Foundry missions, other Cryptic content, where art is going to come into play. So you want to at least hit par. So something that, even if it's not the best looking space map ever, it is at least visually interesting. Because Cryptic's really been pushing that recently with their missions. So it's that, I mean, it's hard to find like a new Cryptic map where you have a backdrop that doesn't look good. That's one thing I was noticing from the Nicole Red Alert screenshots, or not the Nicole, the Zenkethi Red Alert screenshots coming up. That does look, again, like a very interesting space map.
Yeah, and I would say that with the lighting broken in the Foundry for space, that it becomes all the more important that we do try to look for other ways to make our maps visually interesting.
Yeah. So here we go. So now we've got a little bit more going on in our nebula and more going on in our star field. So the nebula now has that blue, but it's also got the yellows and the greens from the second nebula backdrop. And then it's got the star field, but it's punched out a little bit more with the star clusters. So now we have something that looks like it's almost like we're inside a stellar nursery. And it's very bright contrast, and it really contrasts the very dark-looking ship, and that's just a function of our lighting being broken. So that's a couple of tricks here. And there's one quick thing, is that if we ever did get space lighting working again, I'm just going to show off one particular layer, or just point it out, because I noticed this in Faded Horizon, that this looked really good. The scattering effect for the fluidic space actually works. As in, it is an additional visual element that if you throw it onto a map, you basically get God rays from any chat. Like, anytime that there's going to be a light and a shadow, you've got that. It looks like there's it's hard to describe it. The start of the mission Survivors, this is what Cryptic did to make that map look really, really good. I mean, that's the best way I can kind of describe it right there. But that doesn't add a whole lot to the backdrop. So what I'm actually going to go ahead and do is actually just do one quick thing. This is actually the one map that we found that does change the lighting. It changes the color, not the intensity. But if you do reach a point in desperation that you're wanting to just change up the look of the ship of a map, just to kind of get a different feel, there's one that works. It's Zarya. And this will work as a custom backdrop and as a default backdrop, too. So if all else fails, just kind of use this one. You can't use it all the time because then your mission just looks orange. But it's if you get to a point where it's like, okay, I want to vary the feel up just once or twice, then this is the way to go. So anyway, though, yeah, so we kind of went through Dominion stuff. We went through Discovery stuff. Let's see. I mean, 23rd century. I mean, we could go a little bit more into that. I mean, let's see. Well, I mean, we covered the Romulans, the Klingons, and, well, have we really talked about the Fed? About what could be going on with them? Because
you mean as far as the future?
Yeah, the 26th century Fed. So we've got we did the Klingons as basically Gothic, and the Romulans as space hippies. Not saying we need to do another comedy route with those guys. Oh wow, this actually doesn't work so well. Interesting. Okay, so this is a function of me putting in a bit different backdrop layer, which is canceling out the lighting effect. So this would take further investigation. But this is adding Zarya. But this is also just another good thing. It's just to show off the effect is that I've actually added in contrasting color here. To again just make this map a little bit more visually interesting.
Yeah.
So anyway, though, did we want to talk about, like, for the Federation, do we think, like, how have things been going with them? Because we've set up that this is after Procyon 5, about 10 years. There's still some elements pushing back. Are we going to see things, and we kind of left this up to individual authors, but do we want to talk about what might be going on with holograms? Because that was actually one thing I was thinking about.
If Captain P.F. Dennis has his way, that they should have full autonomous rights.
Yeah, and then we would assume that the mobile emitter, because that was future technology, is still going to be sort of the, they won't have moved on to something else, presumably.
No, I would say that they are more common now than they were. We're going to steal focus just for a quick sec here, and off what I've been working on. So I got my pillar pretty well, and then I use the curved kind of branch it, or to bring it around, and then finish off with I had to use a building block wall because I could find nothing else that would work well for that. So it's a little funky, but I think once you get if I put a bunch of them around the bridge, it'll look better. It'll look more artistic.
Yeah, so I really like that. I like it. Yeah, that is really, really cool. Because, that reminds me a little bit of what DJX Prime was doing with his most recent mission, of using the curved pillars and then some other asset type to make it, to kind of give that domed-in look. And I think even with the height as it is, I mean, that adds texture to the ceiling, even though it's not completely flush. I think that works out really well.
Well, I mean, yeah, like I said, if you get a bunch of them, then it looks like it's artistic and not just a mistake.
Yeah, so, and some things in the Foundry do come out well when you approach it like that. It's like, hey, that looks cool. I'm just going to keep going with it. So, yeah, I think that looks really well as a piece. It's only 3 assets, too, so it's not going to make our map exorbitantly more complicated. And then what we can go ahead and do is just add invisible walls, so it's like, oh, it's a force field or something like that. Or really, really nice-looking glass. So, yeah, I think that looks really good.
Okay, I will let you have control.
So I mean, for custom backdrops like that, do I want to show off the other one? No. There's one more map. Go for it.
I was just going to say, You talked about the backdrops, but what about designing like the objects inside the map?
Okay, so yeah, we can go ahead and do work on that. So undelete that. There we go. So yeah, so we've got that backdrop now. So let's say that we want to make this let's go with asteroids, because asteroids we got a lot of options. Actually, no, because I did talk about planets. Let's start off with that. So let's make this, let's see, gas giant system, just to give us a little bit more justification to put a lot in here. So I'm going to go ahead and plonk down one of the class J's. There we go. So starting off like that. So if we just, let's just go ahead and show off something here. I'm just going to place a few down like that, just to make 1 point. And then let's go ahead and test that out. So yeah, first inclination, I'm just going to place down 2 planets, and then, hey, there we go. And let's see how this looks. And then we'll show how to do it a little bit differently. Yeah. So, there we go. Waiting. So, anyway, back to Future Fed.
Future Romulan?
Well, not the bridge, but just...
Oh, sorry, you're the topic.
Yeah, the topic. Because that's an inclination.
Okay,
like,
so I'm hesitant to ever vary off the Federation too much, because they are such a staple. I would say it's more of the calm after the storm. I mean, the whole Battle of Procyon 5 happened. I don't think we're too far removed from that, like maybe a year or two at most.
For Procyon?
Yeah. So things have started to come back to normal, but it's not so long that it feels like something that was ages ago.
Yeah, I mean, we did say like 10 years, but that's still, I would say, within that same time frame.
Yeah, so obviously the alliance has become closer in that time.
Mm-hmm.
But not quite to the point of joining, but I mean, in general, that kind of pushes it towards like an era of peace.
Yeah. What I'm thinking about right now is how might authors approach what species are in the Fed? I mean, granted, everything that we know now, but I'm thinking from Star Trek Online, how would an author, what might an author do to sort of advance the Fed a little bit in just very subtle ways, like say with background characters?
I would say be more willing to throw in races that would previously be kind of odd in Starfleet, like more Ferengi, more
Xindi.
You can do Xindi, although technically the only reason Xindi don't show up in all over the place is because they were not introduced until Enterprise.
Yeah.
Not so much
it's still something. Yeah, I mean, they had their one cameo ambassador in Star Trek Online, but it's still something we haven't really seen too many of, besides Dagon from Drogon's missions. Talaxian would also be another one.
I had a Xindi in mine.
Oh, which one?
It was one of
Midas?
the Midas, one of the
security
yeah.
officers. Yeah, there we go.
And he was bald. I think it made him bald at the time when we didn't have the hair.
Yeah. So, what about the Lucari? Because they were there at the conference.
Lucari would make more sense. I would say possibly more hybrid races.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I know it's like one of those fan fantasy sort of things. So, like everybody wants to play like a half something in Stowe. But I would say as NPCs, you see more mixed races.
Yeah.
Because that definitely seems the future that we were building towards.
And you don't ever have to even like bring up the point. One thing you could do is just basically have someone there or just like you create an Andorian with an alien and then give them a Bajoran nose. And then that's the character. You don't ever call attention to the fact that you've mixed parts up in the alien gen. But that's just part of the background.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, gonna show off some stuff.
Okay. But yeah, as the view, just as you're changing up here, I'm just going to say that for the view of the planets here, I put them on the same plane as the player, in plane 0. So they kind of work as a system, but they're very flat, and there's not a whole lot to look at. I mean, you have them in one direction and not others. So when we come back, we'll have a few modifications to make that more interesting.
Yeah, this is how it turned out. I'm not really liking it. Like I said, if it was just one, it would look a little weird, but with all of them, it looks nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that looks good. I mean, yeah, and especially, too, that it kind of... It complements it really well. And, yeah, I was kind of thinking, like, how does it interact with the pillars up front? I think it works out pretty well. To your left, along the arc towards the wall. So it's hard to describe. If you go back to the main disk...
Yeah, man, I'm several seconds ahead of you.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to work with right now. Is that to your straight ahead as you were, so to your right, there's that one counter display. So not in the center, where you've got the bank of consoles. Directly to the left of that, there's just one holographic podium.
Oh.
Just
sure,
that
I
one.
originally put that there. I probably pulled it out of the center. I probably originally had it over here in the center.
Ah, okay. Because, yeah, that just to one side, it's like, it's a little busy.
Nope, don't need it. I think it was just meant to be in the middle, and then it ended up...
Yeah. Yeah, like the conference table with the holographic display. But no, I think that really works really well. So you just, at this point, now it's just using invisible walls to close in the space. And,
yeah. The downside of invisible walls is they don't block the camera. The camera can swing through invisible walls.
Yeah. Although that might be good for what we're doing right now. Because it would allow them to see a little bit more of the underside. Well,
I don't want them to see the underside.
Yeah. Well, we want to see the underside because we put stuff there. It's the like the far extremities of the wings.
Well, I mean, I don't want to see them to be able to see below the lower disc.
Yeah, below the lower disc. But the lower disc itself, yeah, it's fine because we do have those things. Because, yeah, the problem is the glass is square, so anything that would be high enough, unless we do like a series, but then this is going to be really, really difficult to put together in full. Because you could do smaller squares that sort of fit between those two pillars, but you would need to do multiple stacks.
Yeah, I don't really want to do that. This build is already pretty massive.
Yeah, so invisible walls would be the cheapest way of doing that, especially if you use just a relatively long one. You don't even need to get it contoured exactly with the disc. You can cut it off a little bit because players aren't really going to be bumping up right against this.
And with the invisible walls tall, I can make it all the way up.
Yeah.
Okay, that's just going to be one of those. I have to live with it.
Yeah, especially for a Foundry build like this, I still think this is going to, even though it's going to have a few, well, basically a few line of sight things, or line of sight problems. I mean, individual authors could work with it a little bit more.
Yeah. Already dreading to translate all of this into a spreadsheet.
Yeah. If you wanted, for the invisible walls, you can make them a little bit larger. I mean, get a real, like, have a real rough profile on that lower disc.
Oh, you're just saying, that's probably not a terrible idea.
Because, I mean, it would save, like 5 assets. So, every little bit counts.
I can do them between 2. I don't think I could get away with between 3.
Yeah. Let's see. And I know PAX has thrown in the Dominion, a Dominion representative, to our fleet heading out to Centaurus A.
Well, we have a couple of clues because we see the Federation in the 7th century during the Accord signing.
Yeah.
Which I realize is still a couple centuries after this.
But... Yes. So we get a Klingon there, so that kind of sets our timeline for when the Klingons join. The Dominion are still separate, and what I kind of found interesting is that the Lucari still had their own separate ambassador. I mean, they had a separate representative. They're with the Fed, though, like in the same area. So they become a relatively major species. Although is still part of the same general grouping.
So what if we were to have like a character? So maybe the prominence of the Lucari comes from their knowledge of protomatter technology. Maybe we have a Lucari representative who is the like a protomatter expert, kind of like a liaison.
Yeah, like a terraforming specialist. I mean, it could even just be that simple. Where, like, if we're talking about like setting up a colony in Centaurus A is kind of a beachhead, and Lucari character could be responsible for that, just setting that up, getting a biosphere working, and then working with a protomatter that way. Because it could just be like protomatter, like right now. I mean, even in Stowe, it's going to be something that is going to be really dangerous, and people aren't really going to want to handle that.
And we Genesis bombed one thing with it, so what's another thing, eh?
Yeah, so we've done...
Just we didn't make anything complicated.
Yeah, so I'm thinking with protomatter, it could be that it sort of evolved as a new science.
Well, do you remember that? You remember that one episode of Deep Space Nine when they first got the Romulan cloak, and they had the Romulan that kind of came along with it? So maybe it's something like that, except not just one episode. Where it's it's kind of like this like representative that it comes along. So an experienced experienced technician, but also kind of there to make sure that it's not misused.
Mm-hmm.
Well, for the new fleet holding, I mean, it's kind of like they kind of didn't hint very strongly about anything, but they did mention that there's stuff to look at and interact with while you walk around the place.
One thing could be for protomatter technology is that we're talking like for Genesis, like any Genesis effect, it's all large scale, but you could also do small scale, like Genesis created animal life, or kind of Genesis based or protomatter based medical technologies for lots of regen.
Well, I mean, Stowe has actually several technologies that have been come up with by the Lucari or derived from Lucari designs that you can already see, like the Lucari rep gear. I mean, some of that stuff is protomatter-based technology.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking for if we have a Lucari specialist on board with protomatter tech, they can have sort of two scales of work. Basically microbiology with any sort of medical technology that uses protomatter, but also planetary engineering. So they could be basically super biologists.
Yeah. I know. I mean, that's a good question. Is how much foot or presence are we looking to put in the galaxy? Once we find, hypothetically, once we found Earth, even have the ability to move it back? Or to be just
that's
kind
a question. It'd be a question. I mean, it could be that the Alliance doesn't know, so a contingency plan would be to establish a permanent presence to help support Earth and its population wherever it happens to be. So it could be like we're going to look for a way to use the shielding technology to maybe create a wormhole back using a similar effect. But if that's not an option, we got to think about maybe setting up a permanent Alliance presence in Centaurus A.
That's actually a pretty interesting question there, because the Federation has actually experimented with wormhole creation technology for quite a while, and hasn't quite managed to perfect it yet. But it is something that they have enough information about to at least understand it well enough to be able to actually do proper experiments, not just talk about it.
Well, one of the interesting things that kind of kicked off this whole thing is Daniel's comment when Archer asked, "Is Earth still there?" and Archer answers, "More or less," and that kind of started the whole, well, maybe it got moved thing.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe,
or that it's somehow become utterly unrecognizable.
I mean, it can be interpreted a lot of different ways, but I'm just saying that maybe that's maybe they can't put it back. Maybe it is one of those things that we just learn to accept that it's in a different galaxy now.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually one of the TNG novels about a place where, for some reason or other, Picard and his crew get called to a galaxy, or called to a solar system, either in or near Federation space, because the planet in the solar system is being threatened by some sort of a stellar eruption. And eventually their solution to the problem is to create a temporary wormhole so that the planet drifts through the wormhole on its orbit and ends up orbiting some other star. Which, to be honest, is one of those things where targeting the exit of the wormhole would be insane. Because, see, with that one is that you need to get the exit point at the right distance from the sun, and so that aligned properly, so that when the planet orbits into the wormhole and then orbits back out, it's still moving at the correct angle to orbit its new sun.
Yeah, so that could just add another layer of complication that players can maybe address in optional dialogue. Of just kind of explain it, like having a very frazzled scientist saying that, hey, we're thinking about this, but do you realize how complicated this entire process would be? So yeah. I would say just going into the project, there might be just the idea that, hey, we might have to plan to live with this, and then we see what people come up with in the anthology to really kind of decide what happens with Earth, how it gets involved with other things, what it represents to the people there.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. Before we really say what the final outcome of all this is, I really kind of want to see what everyone else kind of comes with in the meantime. I mean, they can't solve the problem of Earth, but they can. I like the idea that this is a collaborative project that kind of work together to kind of figure out the ultimate ultimate resolution. And that might be just something that we come back to and address.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially with new characters, new alien species and factions, because that could be a real nice complicating factor. Is that if a couple of a few authors specify who's around, the final episode could loop things together and really hit home of like what solution needs to happen for the best effect, for all the other complication that's thrown around. So yeah, going back to my screen here. So I've been working on the space map just a little bit, just tweaking objects. So before we had just two assets here on the same level as the player. What I've gone ahead and done is just to, first of all, move everything above the player. That gives a little bit of open space down below, but up above, it makes it a little bit more imposing. So that's kind of what I have sort of worked out through various missions. If you want something to have a little bit more of sort of the imposing feel, putting the player down below it works really well. If you want to sort of have it more of a scanning, sort of free-ranging type feel for an episode, putting everything down below the player, so they're kind of having a bird's eye down view of the planetary system. That works out pretty well too. So there's the way that you handle the physical structure of a space map can certainly affect the tone of it. So here, I wouldn't necessarily be looking for super exploration, but it might be just a more imposing map, so I might be dealing with something a little bit more focused here, maybe involving more space combat. But the other thing I made sure I did is that I've added a few more assets here. So in a little bit of a blank space there, I had another planet, but also of a different type, so not just another Class D. I think that's a Class Y of some kind. But I also made sure that the planets were, the moons were of slightly different heights to the main gas giant. Just kind of to give the impression that things are a little bit irregular, so they have tilted orbits relative to the gas giant. So it doesn't look quite as neat, and there's a little bit more visually going on. So you kind of recognize that, hey, that's not quite aligned, and just that realization adds a little bit more texture, because there's just more going on here.
Try like taking that gas giant and actually moving it below the player of the plane.
Yeah, so I can go ahead and just flip around everything down to a negative.
Well, just the gas giant, so they're kind of on different planes.
Ah, there we go. Because yeah, the different plane one, that definitely works well too. Just having stuff down below, and I typically do that a little bit more with just some of the moons up high, some of the moons down low. So you have some with really eccentric orbits. Yeah, for the 26th century I've been working on, mission I've been working on, I'm still stuck at the characters. I've got the factions down pretty well, although I'm still considering whether or not to make one a good or, a quote good guy, quote bad guy, but I'm hopefully going to have a lot of good gray area in this. But I still don't know who it's going to be about, because I had the idea from last show, and then working on it, it's like, I don't want to do another romance B-plot in this. I want to do something else. So I might do what I haven't done.
Commenting on my romance B-plots anymore.
No. They've got enough. And I mean, for Starfleet Security, there's no getting around that. So I was hoping to get a little bit like with the last episode, just to sort of push it off the side. But it's like, with how that's going to go, it's going to be a little bit more of a B plot, not like a C or a D plot. So for this one, I'm just like, I want to go back to a standard team. Just a team of people. So yeah, this is another thing that looks really good. A little bit harder to sort of like think about in terms of how this planetary system actually works. But yeah, just putting the gas giant down low. I mean, we kind of have a very different feel for the map. We've got a lot more stuff going on. So so the views are filled up a little bit more. So you look up, we got that. Look down, we got that. So already there's a little bit more going on. Yeah. So then from here on, this is kind of like how I'd start a space map build of just kind of setting up the big structural elements and then filling in with everything else. And that's... it really kind of depends on what you want to be doing in the mission, like exploring a derelict, going to a space station, doing a survey mission that's interrupted by certain things. And we don't really have a lot of assets to work with when it comes to certain types of space stations, but with the platform assets, you can do a lot of custom building. And then with asteroids, I mean, we got all sorts of different types, mix and match them, give them a little bit more texture, and certainly also play around with heights on those as well. And with just like two asteroids, we can go ahead and demonstrate this a little bit later, but I didn't want to get too sidetracked from 26th century. Is that if you have two asteroid fields that are more or less circular, putting them sort of closer together, but at different heights, you can get them to arc or do other things, kind of like what we saw in that first build. So I can go ahead and get started working on that, and then we can kind of resume discussion on 26C.
I'm messing around with consoles on the lower level. Haven't quite found something I like yet.
Okay, but I just like for what we're going to be talking about while I fiddle with asteroid props here. Because yeah, I mean, I'm going to be playing with asteroids. But anyway, yeah, just with the characters, it's like I haven't done like a Starfleet security standard team, kind of like what I started Gemini with, of just a bunch of people who were doing things. Trident had that, Epoch had that a little bit, but they all sort of like developed ad hoc. It wasn't like you went in with 4 people. I've always kind of, like for the last few missions, I've cut the introductions down. So maybe like on the first map, you get introduced to a couple of characters and then a few more. And then by the end, you got a group of people, but I haven't started with a group yet in a while. And that's like a little bit of a different project
group?
build.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, I mean, that's what I was thinking about. Well, I mean, it could be new and old characters, because I've got a few people running around in 26C.
Well, I mean, trying to introduce like half a dozen characters all at once is a bit of a chore anyways.
You can do it, though. I mean, the way that I've... Yeah.
It's just not easy.
The way to do it that I found works most effectively is to do it as a group conversation. So you do not run through formal introductions besides just like the meet and greet. You can then, like basically then once the dialogue is over, each person can then be an optional dialogue contact if you want to have the player get a little bit more familiar with any given character. But the way to do it, like I like doing that, is not to do like, oh, you got to talk to this person, then you talk to this person, and everyone's kind of separate, is that you have everyone in the group talking at once, and then that allows you to show off personalities and show off how people fit within the group, is to actually see the group function as a group.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I'm one of those people who thinks that one of the easiest traps we authors fall into, and I am just as guilty of this myself, is overwriting. We have to throw in all of these extra details, and I think just having things occur more naturally is a better in the long run, versus trying to have all of the characters out there ready to give you their life stories.
Yeah, and I like that was the first thing I did in Gemini, was actually everyone is in a room, you have that conversation, and then the player's then free to then question each character, including major backstory points. I kind of flipped that around in my last mission, is that there's a moment where you have the dialogue, you have the multi-group interchange, and then you've got to talk to the 2 officers, but they function differently. So one of the officers gives you more backstory, like is sort of getting the player back up to speed on the SSF series, so he's a little bit more dry. But then Jigoro in that mission is just doing something completely different, and it's not that she's giving you straight backstory information, unless you hit one very specific prompt. It's what she's doing and just having a very light conversation. That's what's giving her the characterization. So you can be very creative on that point. But yeah, for 2060, I've just been thinking about this. Is like, you know what? I kind of want to do another big group. It's hard to work with. I've been doing a lot of small team stuff where it's like, you know what? Just start I mean, that for me is going to be creatively interesting enough to carry out through a completed build. Because for me, it's like right now, it's like I've got a lot of good single character ideas, or even like 2-way character ideas. But getting a full group running again, that would be interesting, especially since, you know, it's something I can kind of keep running with. I have a full group that I could run, but I was kind of wanting to save it for a Romulan series, because there's some really good character arcs if I have the current events of Stowe to work with. So yeah, we'll see how this kind of takes shape. I kind of want to get Pim in there from Trident, because he's going to have some good interactions if I can get that done right. But we'll see. So anyway, what I've been doing is just setting up these asteroids and kind of building a little bit of flow to them. But what I've done for this asteroid field is that it's going to be going, part of it's going up, part of it's going down. And all I did there was that I set the center at 0, and then I built one, I just made another, I copied that over, set it up 5, copied another one over, set it up 10, copied it over, set it up 15, and then I did the same thing on the other side in the negative direction. So I'm working with both.
Object creation. It'll give you results that you just can't do by just dumping things on the map and spots.
And this has actually been producing pretty good results of doing it this way, of just using these asteroid fields and then kind of causing these to loop around a little bit, yeah, almost in an organic way. Kind of like if, you know, a planet got shattered and it's kind of being torn right now between several different gravity wells in the system. And that was
Like I was saying,
definitely
I
what I was
just
going for the last
did
one.
something where a moon-breaking import was basically the formation of a ring around the planet.
Yeah. And then for this, the first build I did, the entire point of the map is that it's a planetary mining operation that's just blowing up one of the planets and then using the debris to smash apart other planets in the system. And then using as basically the planetary system itself as one big grinder. And then you just harvest up all the processed, the chewed up resources. Now, the one thing I'll say with this one is that I used the same type throughout, and I didn't intersperse it with anything, so it looks a little too uniform.
We have
but you
different
can
sizes, too, that can really break that up.
And you can also add different materials. Like, you can start throwing in ice chunks to kind of give it, the composition was was heterogeneous. So that's kind of the start. It's just like, okay, I've used the big asteroids to kind of set up the broad scale, filling up the space. And then it's got structure to it. So if I move straight forward through this, I can kind of see that it's not just, it's going to be beside me at a certain point, it's going to be over me at a certain point, and that can give a little bit more feel to progression in the mission. That the objects around you, I mean, you have different surroundings. So at one point things are under you, at one point things are over you. So the experience, you can get a little bit more of a feel for being later in the map and earlier in the map. Yeah, now I'll go ahead and start adding chunks. I'll start with the icy chunks because I do like those. Those are the shards.
Ooh, you gonna throw in any ship debris objects? Because those always break up the monotony a little.
Oh yeah, those do.
It looks like some others have tried to mine this area before and paid the price.
Well, I mean, that method you were talking about of mining sounds like something that's extremely chaotic, and either you do a good job of avoiding having pieces of debris bounce off your hull, or you get a new hull. Yeah.
Or you don't get a new hull, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, you might not live long enough to get a new hull, that's for sure.
Exactly.
The one thing also comment right here is just that one thing I'm also doing is if I copy two fields over, I'll change the orientation a bit just to make sure that the player doesn't pick up a pattern. Because if they kind of see like that a given object repeats at certain intervals, then it can kind of take them out a little bit. Because humans are good at
the
that
assets
pattern
too to kind of
mix
up the patterns.
Yeah, and that's what I just did. And then
placing the objects in a regular pattern doesn't necessarily require you to even use the same object in each iteration of the pattern. The locations are non-random, but the objects at the locations can be.
Yeah. So let's see, on that one, so that's 6. I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to have the ice field arc up a little bit. So then I'll go ahead and add ship debris. Search field does help.
Okay, so this is what I got on the lower level so far.
Ooh. I like that.
Those console crate combos to...
Yeah, and those just work really effectively. They fit in perfectly. There's... I mean, just having...
They're bulky enough that you don't really expect to be able to walk around them.
Yeah, and kind of placing them in this configuration, even though those crates do show up in the game a few times, they're not immediately apparent. I mean, they're right there, but it's just the context of their use makes it feel like it's not like a cargo bay.
Yeah.
That these are specialty consoles.
Yeah, and I'll probably add in some of those consoles I have on the upper level down here against the wall. Maybe some kind of a... maybe what I'll do is I'll throw a... one of those Falcon statues, like right here in the middle. break of it.
Ooh, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, they may be space hippies, but they're not above their grand tendencies.
The
There's and
grandiose space hippies.
that's kind of the cool thing is with the columns, it actually almost look. It kind of gets back to the Roman roots that are the Romulan.
Especially for a command center. I mean, it fits really well.
I mean, Romulans are, Romulans, but part of being Romulan is basically, I guess you could say, that whole "we're awesome, more awesome than you" sort of way of thinking.
Yeah. They're space hippies, and they kind of think they're better than you.
Well, I mean, Romulan Star Empire, I wouldn't really call them space hippies.
Well, in our anthology project.
Oh, right. You're really doing more like the Romulan Republic.
Yeah, the evolution of that. Although there's probably just the planets that used to be in the Star Empire have probably been mostly absorbed.
I think at this point the Romulan Star Empire is no more. Maybe you get like little fringes of like the true way. But yeah, I mean, as far as a power, like a political power,
it's more like a historical footnote than a actual everyday thing that people interact with.
Because it could be the one thing that the one way to get it to show up in the 26th century is that you have a former someone who's from one of the old Star Empire colonies or Star Empire worlds, and they have a little bit of more of a chip on their shoulder.
I suppose because I mean, Romulan lives are much longer than humans, so
or it's just like
100-ish years removed.
Yeah, well, I'm thinking also just from broad social background. So you have like a second or third generation Romulan who is now in the Republic, but their world may not have worlds in the Star Empire. If the ones that are currently in Stowe's timeline would be currently affiliated. I mean, joining relatively late. I mean, there's not going to be their culture probably isn't going to flip overnight. So you might still have tendencies of the old Imperial Romulan officers is still extant, and then you can explain it's like, oh yeah, my world was one of the last to join the Republic, something like that.
I mean, one of the interesting things about the path to 2409 is the simple fact that that whole Romulan civil war that got started with Sela and all those other Romulans getting in this big power struggle after Hovis. One of the interesting things with that is that there were certain of those Romulan colony worlds that are like, screw the Civil War, we're going to join the Federation.
Yeah. So now since we're back to looking at my screen, so I'm going to, I was just changing up one of the assets here. So I've added ice shards and I've added debris here, but not like consistently throughout, but through different sections. So again, I'm adding heterogeneity, not in a uniform way, but in a mixed way.
Well, I guess you could say that what I was going for with that line of discussion was that Romulans are not of the mindset of, well, we'll just do what everyone else does. It's more of the, we'll do whatever we feel is best for us. And each individual group of Romulans makes their own ideas.
Yeah. And you can have that still showing up in individual personalities, even if the Star Empire itself is completely by the wayside by our 26th century anthology.
I mean, certain parts of the old Romulan Star Empire and TNG era would have happily joined the Federation and lived in peace with their Vulcan brothers. It's just that it wasn't really the entirety of the Romulan Star Empire. That was just a few people here and there.
Yeah. So, getting to my screen right now. So this I'd still like to flesh out because, like, what's right in front of me right there, it's like, I'd still want to put something there. Actually, I'll go ahead and do that to finish this one up. But just flying through this now, there's much more to look at. So there's a couple of different types of debris, and you can even go finer scale too, throwing more, and kind of flying past the ship immediately. But just flying through this now, there's a lot different feel. And also I put a nebula too, towards the end with the most ice shards. So again, just add a little bit more variation to this. And it's a simple thing to do, especially if it's just one nebula. You certainly don't have to worry about performance problems with that.
Yeah.
Regardless of where you are. But now there's a lot more going on to the space map. It's arcing. There's three-dimensionality to it. You can also work with this in terms of gameplay, putting certain objectives in one location, having the player move to another location. Combat in one area versus another might play a little bit differently, because now you can actually use cover in some of these battles.
That's actually something that you got to be careful with in space maps, because sometimes...
Oh yeah, you don't want things to get stuck, but like a lot of these free asteroids, you can move around them, so you definitely don't want to sort of create something that could become a trap, especially for AIs. But something as simple as this is going to be okay to navigate around. Then a single big object, too, could also be used for a similar purpose. Like I'm going to go put right now. So we've got one asteroid type. It's the big donut. Let's see, XL. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, the donut asteroids, those are always amusing things to use.
And that's going to be at 15. And this happens to blend in with the asteroid types I've been using. And just for fun, I'm going to put a destroyed Borg cube in here too. And a little bit off from the donut asteroid too, in terms of its vertical height. And then once I prove this again, I think this would be a sufficient run through of just a few things authors can think about when they're building out their space maps. Adding texture, adding chunky bits, and you can even incorporate those into objectives and how you approach combat.
Well, I found a smaller Romulan statue that's actually listed under buildings.
Oh yeah, there's a few assets. They've got a lamp, a couple of statues.
Yeah, the Romulan statues are pretty cool, simply because we have several sizes of them.
Yeah, and we've also got the Vulcan crates under buildings too. I only discovered those with Johnny Snowball doing Smuggler's Life for me, because I didn't think those existed. Then Johnny had them. It's like, he has special powers, or just no, use those guys.
He spends a lot of time messing with the asset list. It's like, what does this do? Because there's a lot of things where
just exploring.
Looking at it in a preview mode doesn't really give you all the information you need in order to use it in a mission properly. So you got to experiment more. Then John Snowball is the kind of person who would use one of those giant fungus props as something other than a giant fungus.
Yep.
He actually used one of them as a building column once. So he hid the cap of the mushroom above the ceiling. So you walk up to the stalk of the mushroom in the middle of a room or something like that.
Yeah.
I found him to be incredibly resourceful when he wants to be.
When he wants to be.
Okay, so most of the time.
Yeah. I was thinking, it's like, when does he not want to be?
Yeah, when we were at Star Trek Las Vegas, Dragoon and I got to meet him, and he had a different stow uniform for every day of the convention, and apparently he just taught himself to sew to make this.
Truthfully, teaching yourself how to sew really isn't that hard.
It seems hard to me.
Yeah,
Well,
like I've done.
It's a matter of learning a list of things to pay attention to, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah,
But I
it's
look
like
great.
any other mechanic. Yeah,
Mm.
I saw screenshot or not screenshots, pictures of those, and yeah,
Be really
I think.
good.
Yeah, those are some really impressive Odyssey uniforms. And he was also at STLV this year.
Yeah, so apparently he's
And
rich and has a flying castle.
Yeah, he's rich and has a flying castle. But it was funny is that he was paying attention to the Twitch live stream for 10 Forward Weekly, where Kale was doing his two-phone power.
Yeah, so he could simul stream to Twitch and.
Yeah, so I may have goaded Johnny Snowball into doing a photobomb. So people on 10 Forward Weekly, if you saw a crazy British person just go Foundry photobomb and just sort of at first confuse and then delight Kale. Yeah, that was Johnny Snowball.
So, what are your odds here that you'll go to Star Trek Las Vegas one of these years?
I really, really want to go. It's just I need a different job that would give me disposable income. Then I'd definitely go.
I would like to go. It's just scheduling and stuff.
For me, I at least want to do it as, I mean, at the very least, I would do the crazy fly in the morning, stay the day, fly out that night. I mean, just to kind of keep the cost down, because then I don't have to worry about a hotel. Then it's just flight and tickets. That would be crazy insane, but I would do that. But ideally, I'd be staying down at least one night. And then going down that way. But I just don't know when it's going to happen. Hopefully going to be...
see if you can find someone to share a room with.
Yeah, I mean, that would work too. Yeah, so right now I've got to defend a master's thesis and then move on from there. So if I get a real job, then I'd be going to Star Trek Las Vegas. If I go into a PhD program, then it might be a little bit more dicey. But we'll see about how that goes. Yeah, it's something I totally want to do because, I mean, like, I'm not anticipating it being like, because I'm familiar enough with how it goes. It's just, you got the presentations and you got the show floor. So knowing how I process information, it'd be effectively done with like seeing all I wanted, all I needed to see for my own personal experience. I could get that done in an afternoon easy. But I want to go to see, just meet up with people, talk, and do that sort of thing. So a highlight would be like, okay, I want to schedule my time so I could do the meet the devs type thing. Let's see. And I got stuck. Okay. So that's a good enough place to end the space build.
Johnny Snowball says that flights from overseas can actually be cheaper than domestic flights. Makes no sense whatsoever.
Supply demand?
In part, it's because of whether or not it's a single stop flight or one of those where you can't do it in a single jump. It's annoying.
I would seen this online where it's basically people will look for flights that look for flights that have layovers in the places they want to go. But for some bizarre reason, it's cheaper than if you were just to fly there directly.
Yeah, because some people don't want to take that route. So air travel is it's weird for the pricing.
Yeah, it's a little messed up.
I think that part of it is that in some aspects, it's a lot like the old Priceline commercials where Bill Shatner's like, what I see here is a perishable commodity, and by that he means that if empty seats go unfilled on the flight, then that means that the airline lost money, no matter how much the customer may or may not have paid. So
So then they basically will at a certain point undervalue those seats so they can at least get something out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically what I saw this year when I was looking at. I think it was like the week before STLV. I was like, just kind of toying, what would it actually take? And I pulled up flights, and it was like, I think it was like for like less than like $130, I could get round trip tickets to Las Vegas.
Yeah, I was looking at something similar to that because I've been meaning to fly out to Colorado to visit my brother. So I've been taking a look at airfare recently. But yeah, it's always a little bit of a game, especially like when you get like something like kayak, and it's like, okay, well, I can specify what I want to, like, do I want to take this flight versus this flight, and just sort of game it based on price. And yeah.
So far for me, Google Flights have always tended to produce some of the cheapest flights.
I haven't taken a look at those yet.
And that's kind of nice because then you can kind of do things that'll start making suggestions like, well, if you can see all the dates in the matrix and see how the prices per tickets vary by day.
Yeah, like if you when you want to get there is Tuesday, but if you look at the dates, you realize that if you get there on Monday and then just stay in the hotel for an extra day, it'll be cheaper, maybe.
Yeah,
it's just one of those interesting things. It's like so many weird variables to consider.
What you could do is get your own intergalactic spaceship, which I'm running around right now. If we want to change camera view, real quick, just to kind of show off something else Dragoon was talking about before the show, like how you would make an alien ship interior feel more like less customary. And I can just go through a quick example like this. Well, we're also talking about flights. But yeah, so with how to build these types of spaces out, there's a lot of different options because you're working with ground interior detail assets. But a couple of things that I did to make this space feel a little bit different, I put lights above gratings, and you see how that works out on the floor.
Yeah,
and that was my one objective here. Yeah, you put stuff over the ceiling. Well, first of all, you use ceiling lights. Secondly, put things over the ceiling lights, and then you've got a lot of great texture. And then I complemented that by doing more piping down here, a little bit more of a industrial feel. But then I kind of mixed it up with something that was a little bit more organic. So I used one of the plants and a couple of combinations of science consoles to make this sort of bridge-type terminal. Netting, because you wouldn't expect that. So it gives a little bit of a different feel, a little bit more alien. Indecipherable transporter thingy. Again, more alien. This is one of the elevators combined with a holographic stand. And then just a bunch of combinations for the walls and support pillars, combining curves and combining straight lines as well. So a real big mix of stuff. Kind of follows a little bit of the theme, but kind of connected through the building block pieces. And a little bit of the Spartan wall fixtures, but yeah. So yeah, I mean, especially with 26th Century Anthology, you might be thinking about building your own little... you might have a scene that takes place on a new alien spaceship. That's one thing you can do is kind of play around with different themes, play around with different assets, and try to do things purposely differently than you may have we may have encountered before. Like wainscoting. I added wainscoting on this map. I can actually use the word.
Never underestimate the power of buttresses.
Those two. So you need all that buttressing on a spaceship. So it looks like, hey, this thing is designed to, withstand stress. There's function behind it. It's not. Yeah. I'm not flying a building, although I do have an exterior on this one too.
I have to say that some of the more interesting starship designs I've seen actually did involve the use of flying buttresses on a starship.
Oh yeah, some like the Warhammer 40K stuff.
Well, actually, I was just thinking of some of the more novel methods that people have used as a way to attach the engines to the main ship. I mean, like in Star Trek, these guys had made it so that the engines were their like own little module that's not like embedded in the body of the ship. Although in this case, I think that was a safety feature just in case the engine exploded. But you get the idea.
So, need a quick little feedback. I'm kind of thinking, do we need something here, like in the middle of the lower level?
I think it looks pretty good. Like, it feels like the centerpiece is the is the Romulan statue. So you could add something a little bit more right in front of it.
So, like maybe a hologram or
Hologram,
table
or I would do a little garden, but that takes assets.
Yeah, I don't know if I want
I'm
to do a
thinking
full
for one
garden.
quick thing. Hologram would be easiest. And since we don't have any down here and we have some up there, it'd be a uniting element.
Okay. Might work.
So yeah, that same holograph, the circular science holographic piece. And I'm marking around the space station that I've attached to that small little ship.
Doing like an umbilical thing?
It was just a little docking port. So the thing is, I've got 2 building assets, and that's it. I've hit the asset limit on this one. And I still got to do optional. Like, I still have to stay. I had objective stage on this map, and then I changed the plot, and now things are completely different. So now I'm actually kind of like stuck at the point of like, okay, I've got a map, but I don't really have a good set of plot points. So I could even just completely get rid of this whole build, even though structurally it's done. But yeah, this is just the ship. And originally it was going to be we're in the ship, and then we walk out here, and then we're in the station. And then crazy future force field tech is what explains the fact that we just got 1 plank. I was going to do an overhead thing, but now that takes assets. And then the rest of the station here.
Let me ask a question. Is all of your assets in buildings or detail?
Both.
Maxed out both?
Yep. So I've got
Okay.
2 buildings left, period. Because I use the because I've got venues out here too. I moved the floor pieces just so I could see for building the map, but there's a lot of small parts of this one. And contact for a costume I deleted. And I also had to use a lot of assets to get the windows the way I like it here because it's part of the future style. And try to get all the detail I wanted for the centerpiece here. So, cafe, a lot of stuff on the walls. So yeah, it's a done map. It's just like, okay, working out the story, so I'm making the best use out of it now. It's working for a slightly different purpose. I do like the space. It's just like, I got to actually work with a little bit more. Although I do like this, using the Science Central pillar, and then these consoles pointed towards it.
Dun,
Rather
dun,
than
dun.
Yeah. So it just gave it a really different feel, and just kind of like, there's a lot more holographic stuff going on, and I'm not necessarily supposed to use it just standing in front of the consoles, but like standing right here. And, bad guys, but now they're not quite so bad, so I gotta figure out what to do with them.
Once I finally get my refugee colony done, I really want to go do it, showcase it, and it's still got a lot of work to do though. I'm getting to the point where I'm finally just starting to get the layout done, so that you run from one end to the other, and all the major assets are in place. Go through and start adding details.
Yeah, this is yes. So this is how close I am to Epic Part 2. There's only 1 map I need to do any building on, like in a serious way, like actually building out structure, placing assets. Everything else is done. The problem is the story and the writing.
Oh, you're breaking up.
Yeah.
Yep, you're breaking up, and your stream.
Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead.
I think you're back.
Yeah, I got a lot of rubber banding there, so I think my connection just went down. Sec. How about now?
It's coming in and out. Sometimes you're fine. Sometimes you're all broken up.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing just to conserve bandwidth.
Okay.
Because that's probably gonna help if my connection's gonna be is slowing down a little bit.
For a second there, I thought it was me because I did something, but
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if Dragoon's hearing it, it's not me though.
Yeah. So anyway, though, let's see. How am I sounding?
I think you're fine now.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, though, it's just like this is how Foundry builds tend to go. Is that it's always different. So Epoch Part 1 is that I basically built it and wrote it as one linear sequence. So when I finished the building and finished the plot, it was simultaneous. So it's just basically I just kept building moment to moment to moment to moment, and that was actually really fun. This one though, it's kind of built out a little bit more radial, and I ended up finishing all the structural builds before I finished the writing. And I came up with better ideas for the writing because I wasn't too happy with how things were working out here. It's a big two-parter, and I wanted to make sure that things were working out. And yeah, I think I got a good story now. Good character arcs. But yeah, just finishing that off is always a little bit of a challenge. One day I might try a part 3, but we'll see.
I don't think I'm too much further on this map. There's a couple of things I got to take care of. I got to put in some walls to cover up the ceiling of that one wall.
Yeah, and just like for the ceiling above this, it's just place another it's just another disc to give. Oh, actually, no, we're good on that one.
Yeah, gotta put some doors in.
Yeah, now we're like one thing I actually found was actually pretty neat for doors is actually using the back of the cylindrical gray Cardassian elevator. That's actually what I was doing on this build here. So it's Lift Cardassian 03. You turn it around, and you get a doorway, but it's protruding out a little bit. So it's easier to place, and it's a little bit more interesting. And I was thinking about that just to vary this up from a standard Romulan build. Instead of using Romulan doors, just go ahead and use that, just insert it into one of these walls.
Well, I mean, it's future Romulans who may or may not have been inspired by Vulcan design aesthetics, so, you know.
Yeah. Or it could be like, their little transporter booths, because that's something they did talk about for the design of the Enterprise J, and this is at the same scale.
Of course, though, does it need to be a booth, or can you just like tap your comm badge and zap?
Yeah. But I was just thinking of that, if you just have it as just, you rotate it around, use the back of it. It could be a door, it could be a transporter thing. I mean, it's ambiguous and you never use it, so.
Yeah. Well, actually, now that I think about it again, one of the explanations for why there's a transporter pad in the first place is that standing on the transporter pad means that the transporter needs to use less energy or something or other.
Yeah. One quick thing with the design. You'll be using the back end of those guys if you rotate them so they're facing to the left.
I think
based
I
on
got
the
it, but
current
I'll find out
orientation.
soon enough.
Oh, I'm looking at the asset on my screen right now. So if they're facing left, then you're going to be looking at the back. If they're facing right, then you're going to be looking at the front.
Oh, now that I think about it, an intership transporter system, the most efficient way based on amount of energy used would definitely be to have it so you basically just like step into a phone booth, push a button on which other booth you want to zap to, and then.
Yeah, especially if like a large population is using it on a daily basis, then a little bit of energy savings is going to go a long way.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things where you save a little bit here, you save a little bit there, and 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 there. Like, says saving 5% doesn't sound all that impressive until you do it 100 times.
Yeah,
an hour.
All right, so I think this is going to be my final tour before we wrap things up.
Yeah. So, So overall, I'm really looking forward to just building this out and using it because it looks like really great space.
Yeah, I'm kind of happy with how it's turned out. Our Nanoff pool.
Yeah. I
Lower
really like
area.
that ceiling. I just kind of...
Even if nobody comes down here, it kind of feels like stuff could be happening down here.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I mean,
that's not
it's
even
just...
close to big enough. Okay, that'll be something I play with in the off hours. This is really close, and it's just a couple of details that, frankly, are just going to require taking some time to
just
get
flush
in
this
place.
out. And I was thinking with the to fill that last space out, I mean, you could just put a wall right where that elevator is, and then just sort of center that in the hallway, and then that's basically done right there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a functioning door.
Mm-hmm.
It's just decoration, eh?
Yeah, because this is a large enough space as it is.
Just to get an idea. Counting the spawn point, we are looking at 151 assets.
That's going to be... let's just say we apologize for the amount of work that we have set before you, Dragoon, for this anthology project.
Yeah, that is an evening or two of work. Well,
what we might want to do is that, I mean, you've got this map.
Yeah.
Do we want to do this by request? Like,
well,
because
I mean,
here's the thing: is like if you do all the work, put out 150 assets in addition to whatever we do for the Fed, because we did do our custom hallway.
That I can delete. We don't need that anymore.
Okay.
So it's actually 147.
Okay, because I mean we got it built, so that's the thing is that we know we've got this. I'm just thinking like, just in case no one does it. Because, actually, no, I want to do this. Well, the thing... Actually, hold on. Because for my first mission, I was planning on starting on the Enterprise J, but finishing on the Durgath. So it'd only be if I make a second mission that I would need the Vulcus.
You will make a second mission. You crank out missions like...
Oh, I got a lot to build. I mean, I've got 2 more Starfleet
that has not ever stopped you.
Transcendence, Part 4. I need to make Epoch Part 4, or Part 2. So I don't want that's the thing with 26th Century. It's like, unless I get a really good team going, I was actually planning on keeping it down to 1.
I'm not buying it.
I mean, unless I could do something afterwards, but I mean, I've only made 1 mission this year. I mean, that's the scale of things.
Maybe I just lose it in the sea of all the other ones you've made.
Well, I mean, there's so many work in progress things, because I've effectively made 2 missions in Epoch Part 2. But I've gone back. So, I mean, it got down to a full plot. I was like, oh, I'm going to be getting this done. It's like, then it's like, the ending didn't work. It's like, yeah. Now I've got an ending that works. I just need to... Yeah, I mean, I've built my building pace completely changed this year. So I haven't been making missions quickly. I've been making them very thoroughly.
I often have that issue with missions is I start building and then an hour later I'm like, why am I not done with this thingy yet?
Yeah. And it's also too a lot more goes into my missions now. Like the builds are I'm hitting all the asset limits now for almost all of my builds, if not all of them. I mean, the only ones I'm not hitting is
what's happened to me.
And then that was definitely Fated Horizon, although that was actually a relatively quick build. Because I basically just reached a point. It's like, I need to work on something else. And then it's like, oh, just cranked out another SSF mission. But it's also...
we do need to wrap up.
Okay,
we are kind of hitting the end of our time. So, and if you want to contact us and let us know whether or not you'd actually use a Romulan bridge map, we can be reached by email at foundryroundtable@live.com. We are also on Twitter at Foundry Roundtable. Dragoon can be reached at Dragoon1701. Duncan can be reached at Gorgonops_SSF. Mark can be reached at Markhawkman. And I, of course, can be reached at Greendragoon. And with that, I think it's time for us all to say goodnight.
Good night.